It was one of those bleak winter days, the kind where the sun was just a dull smear in the sky, barely able to cut through the cold gray clouds. Jack sighed as he pushed through the icy wind, clutching the pizza delivery bag to his chest like a lifeline. His phone buzzed with the delivery details. Apartment 3B, no tip expected. He cursed under his breath. The end of a long shift, and he wasn't even getting a decent payout for it. This was supposed to be his last run of the night before he could finally go home, crack open a beer, and forget about the world. The city streets were eerily quiet. The usual hum of traffic was muted, and only a few pedestrians scurried by, huddled in their coats, heads down, avoiding eye contact. Jack was used to the city's odd quirks, but tonight felt different. Something gnawed at the back of his mind, an uneasy feeling he couldn't shake. Maybe it was just the exhaustion setting in, or maybe it was the bizarre stillness that clung to the air like a thick fog. When he reached the apartment building, a run-down relic of better days, Jack paused at the entrance. The building was old, the kind of place that probably smelled like mildew and stale cigarette smoke. Its brick facade was cracked, and the dimly lit entryway flickered weakly, casting long shadows across the threshold. He pulled his jacket tighter around himself and pushed open the door. The hallway was suffocatingly narrow, lined with peeling wallpaper and faded carpets that muffled his footsteps. The elevator was out of service, of course, so he trudged up the stairs, each step creaking ominously beneath his weight. He passed several doors, some of them slightly ajar, giving him glimpses of dark, cluttered apartments. A cat hissed at him from one doorway, its yellow eyes reflecting the dim light. When he reached apartment 3B, he stopped and hesitated for a moment. There was something off about the door. It was scratched and dented as if someone, or something, had tried to claw their way inside. Jack took a deep breath, trying to shake off the sense of dread that had settled in his chest. It's just a job, he told himself. Just one last delivery. He knocked. The sound echoed in the hallway, louder than he expected. No answer. He knocked again, glancing at his phone to double-check the address. Apartment 3B, just like it said. He was about to knock a third time when the door creaked open on its own, revealing a dimly lit apartment beyond. The air that wafted out was thick and musty, with a faint smell of whiskey and something else, something metallic, like blood. "Hello?" Jack called out, his voice barely above a whisper. No response. He took a tentative step inside, squinting to adjust to the low light. The apartment was a mess. Newspapers were strewn across the floor, and the walls were covered in bizarre scribbles and diagrams. Books were stacked in haphazard piles, some open, others torn apart. At the far end of the room, slouched on a tattered couch, was a man. He looked to be in his 50s, his hair wild and unkempt, his clothes disheveled. A half-empty bottle of whiskey rested in his lap. "Ah, Mr. Morris?" Jack asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "I've got your pizza." The man's head snapped up, and for a moment, His eyes locked onto Jack's with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The man's gaze wasn't just unfocused from alcohol. It was crazed, frantic, like he'd seen things no one should ever see. "Put it on the table," Morris rasped, his voice gravelly, as if he hadn't spoken in days. Jack hesitated. The table in question was cluttered with strange objects: a cracked mirror, a stack of yellowed letters, a knife with a stained blade. But he did as he was told, gingerly setting the pizza down amidst the chaos. "You shouldn't have come," Morris muttered, almost to himself. His fingers twitched, gripping the neck of the whiskey bottle tighter. Jack's heart started to race. He wasn't sure what was happening, but every instinct screamed at him to leave. You ordered the pizza, right?" he asked, taking a step back toward the door. Morris's eyes flicked up again, burning with a terrifying intensity. "They're watching. They're always watching. But you don't know that yet, do you?" Jack froze. "What are you talking about, man?" Morris stood up, swaying slightly, and Jack noticed something else now. There was blood on his hands. Dried, crusted around his fingernails. Jack's pulse quickened, panic rising in his chest. He needed to get out of here, now. Before he could move, Morris lunged. Jack barely had time to react before the older man grabbed him by the collar, pulling him into the apartment with surprising strength. The door slammed shut behind them, the lock clicking ominously. Jack struggled, but Morris was stronger than he looked, his grip iron tight. "Listen to me," Morris hissed, his face inches from Jack's, his breath foul with whiskey and something worse. "They know you're here. You're part of it now." Jack's mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. "What the hell are you talking about?" "Let me go!" But Morris didn't loosen his grip. Instead, he dragged Jack further into the apartment, toward the cluttered table. His voice dropped to a whisper. "The shepherds. They control everything. They're everywhere, watching, waiting. You've seen them, haven't you?" "I don't know what you're talking about." Jack gasped, his throat tightening with fear. Morris released him suddenly, sending him stumbling backward into a chair. Jack's legs trembled beneath him as he tried to regain his balance. The room spun around him, the dim light casting twisted shadows that seemed to dance on the walls. "You will," Morris said, his voice low and ominous. "You will soon." Jack's head was swimming. None of this made any sense. He'd just come to deliver a pizza. Now he was trapped in a stranger's apartment with a man who clearly wasn't sane, talking about some mysterious group that sounded like something out of a conspiracy theory forum. "Look, man, I don't want any trouble," Jack said, raising his hands in a placating gesture. "Just let me leave, and I'll forget this ever happened." Morris laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "It's too late for that. They've already seen you. You can't escape now." Before Jack could respond, there was a sound from the corner of the room, a low, raspy breathing. Jack's heart skipped a beat as he turned toward the sound. There, slumped in a shadowy corner, was a woman. Her face was pale, almost ghostly, and her eyes were wide with fear. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days, her body frail and gaunt. What's going on?" Jack whispered, his voice shaking. He didn't dare move. Morris's expression softened, just for a moment, as he glanced at the woman. She tried to fight them, tried to resist. But you can't fight them. Not for long. Jack's breath came in shallow gasps. He needed to get out of here. Now. His eyes darted around the room, searching for any way to escape, but every exit felt blocked, either by Morris or by the crushing weight of fear that seemed to hang in the air. He had to act. In a sudden burst of adrenaline, Jack lunged for the door, his hand scrambling for the lock. But before he could get there, something slammed into him from behind, sending him crashing to the floor. His head hit the hardwood with a sickening thud, and his vision blurred. Through the haze of pain, he heard Morris laughing, that same hollow laugh echoing in his ears. "You can't run," Morris said, his voice distant and distorted as if coming from far away. "There's no escape." Jack's mind was spinning, the room tilting and twisting around him. He tried to push himself up, but his limbs felt heavy, uncooperative. As the darkness crept in at the edges of his vision, he caught one last glimpse of the woman in the corner. Her eyes, wide and terrified, met his. And then everything went black. When Jack woke up, the apartment was silent. His head throbbed with pain, and for a moment, he couldn't remember where he was or what had happened. He blinked, trying to clear his vision. The dim light from a single bulb overhead flickered weakly, casting long, distorted shadows across the room. He was still in the apartment, still trapped. But something was different now. The air felt thicker, heavier, like a tangible weight pressing down on him. He sat up slowly, his body aching from the fall, and glanced around. Morris was sitting at the table again, staring at something in his hands, a small, worn book with a cracked leather cover. Jack's pulse quickened as he noticed the gun on the table next to Morris. His mind raced, trying to figure out his next move. He couldn't stay here. He had to find a way out. "You're awake," Morris said without looking up from the book. His voice was calm now, almost casual, as if nothing had happened. "Good. We have a lot to discuss." Jack swallowed hard, forcing himself to stay calm. "I don't know what's going on, but I need to leave. I won't tell anyone about this, I swear." Morris finally looked up, his eyes cold and distant. "You still don't understand, do you? There's no leaving. Not for you. Not for anyone." Jack's breath hitched in his throat. "What do you mean?" Morris closed the book with a soft thud and leaned back in his chair. "The shepherds control everything. They decide who stays, who goes, who remembers, and who forgets. You think your life is yours, but it's not. It never was. Jack shook his head, trying to grasp the madness of what Morris was saying. You're insane. This is insane. Morris smiled, a thin, crooked smile. Maybe. Or maybe I'm the only one who sees the truth. Jack's eyes darted to the gun on the table. He had to act fast. If he could grab it, maybe he could force Morris to let him go. It was a slim chance, but it was all he had. I need you to listen carefully, Morris continued, his voice taking on a strange, almost hypnotic quality. They're watching you. They've been watching you for a long time. You've seen them, haven't you? In the corners of your vision, in the shadows. You felt their presence. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. He didn't know what Morris was talking about, but the fear that had been gnawing at him since he entered this place was now overwhelming. There was something wrong here, something he couldn't explain. They're always there, Morris whispered. And now, they've marked you. Jack snapped,